The phone call came at 2:47 a.m. Amara Kingsley's hand found her cell in the darkness, muscle memory guiding her past the water glass and the hardcover legal thriller she'd abandoned hours earlier. The screen's glow illuminated her face, deep brown skin, natural curls splayed across Egyptian cotton, eyes sharp despite the hour. Unknown number. She should have ignored it. In her line of work, strange calls at strange hours rarely brought good news. But something. Instinct, curiosity, the lawyer's compulsion to gather information made her answer. Ms. Kingsley? The voice was male, accented. Not a question. You should reconsider your current client. Her pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. Who is this? A friend offering advice. Park Enterprises has complications. Complications that could damage a reputation as pristine as yours. A pause. Your firm's partners would be devastated to lose their star. The line went dead. Amara sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Moonlight filtered through her bedroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric shadows across the hardwood. Her apartment, a corner unit in Tribeca, earned through 14-hour days and ruthless competence, suddenly felt exposed. She pulled up her client list on her phone, though she already knew which name had triggered this warning. Park Enterprises, Jin-Soo Park. The man whose eyes had followed her across a boardroom 3 weeks ago like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. The man who had hired her to defend his company against federal investigation, entrusting her with secrets that now seemed heavier than she'd understood. The man she'd kissed 2 nights ago in his penthouse office, breaking every professional boundary she'd spent her career protecting. Amara's hands trembled as she scrolled through her call log, looking for a number she'd programmed under a simple initial. J. She should call the police. She should call her senior partner. She should do what she'd always done, protect herself through proper channels and documented procedures. Instead, she thought about Jin's voice, low and careful, telling her, "In my world, there are rules, different rules, but rules I will not break for anyone." She pressed dial. The conference room on the 43rd floor of Morrison. Keating and Associates radiated the kind of austere luxury that reminded everyone who entered exactly how much they were paying for the privilege. Amara stood at the windows overlooking Midtown Manhattan, her reflection a study in controlled elegance, tailored navy suit that hugged her curves without apology, hair pulled into a low bun that showcased her bone structure, minimal jewelry, except for the diamond studs her mother had given her when she'd made partner. "They're here," Marcus Chen, one of the junior partners, announced from the doorway. Amara turned, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her skirt. Corporate defense was her specialty. She'd built her reputation dismantling federal cases against Fortune 500 executives, finding the hairline fractures in prosecutorial theory that could collapse an entire investigation. But this client was different. Park Enterprises. The file had landed on her desk a week ago with a note from the managing partner. "They requested you specifically. Do not disappoint." The research she'd conducted since then painted an interesting picture. Park Enterprises was a diversified conglomerate with interests in import-export, commercial real estate, and high-end hospitality. Clean financial records, minimal litigation history. The current investigation centered on alleged customs violations and money laundering, charges that seemed almost routine given the company's international scope. Almost. There were gaps in the public record, spaces where information should have existed but didn't, questions that circled without landing. And the name Jin-Soo Park appeared in connection with certain Manhattan establishments, restaurants, clubs, buildings that catered to a very specific clientele. The door opened. Amara's first impression was height. Jin-Soo Park stood at least 6'2", his lean frame moving with the controlled precision of someone who understood exactly how much space he occupied. Sharp features. dark eyes that scanned the room with an intelligence that made her spine straighten. Charcoal suit tailored to perfection, white shirt open at the collar in a gesture that somehow felt more powerful than formality. Behind him, a second man, shorter, broader, with the alert stillness of professional security. Mr. Park. Marcus extended his hand. Welcome to Morrison Keating. I'm Marcus Chen, and this is Amara Kingsley, Jin said, his gaze locking onto hers. Yes, I know. His handshake was firm but brief, his skin warm against hers. Up close, she noticed details. A small scar near his left temple, the precision of his haircut, the faint scent of cedar and something darker. Thank you for seeing us on short notice, he continued, his English perfect, but carrying the subtle cadence of someone who thought in multiple languages. This is Tae Yang, my head of security. Tae Yang nodded but didn't offer his hand. They settled around the conference table, Marcus and Amara on one side, Jin and Tae Yang on the other. Amara opened her tablet, calling up the preliminary case notes. I've reviewed the government's allegations, she began, her voice carrying the confident rhythm she'd cultivated through hundreds of client meetings. Customs violations, specifically regarding shipment declarations from your Seoul and Busan operations. Potential money laundering through real estate transactions in Manhattan and Queens. The evidence appears circumstantial, but the pattern they're constructing is concerning. Concerning, Jin repeated, the corner of his mouth quirking slightly. That's diplomatic. I'm a lawyer, not a diplomat. Diplomacy suggests I'm representing two sides. I only represent one. She met his eyes directly. The question is whether you want representation that tells you what you want to hear, or representation that wins. Something shifted in his expression. Appreciation, maybe, or recognition. What do you need from me, Ms. Kingsley? Access. Complete access to your financial records, your shipping logs, your property transactions, communications with your overseas partners, board minutes, everything. She paused. And honesty. Gakao, I can defend complicated. I can't defend lies. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside her, but Jin's focus never wavered. I run a legitimate business, he said carefully, but I also operate in industries where perception often conflicts with reality, where associations carry weight regardless of actual conduct. Are you telling me you're guilty? I'm telling you the world is rarely binary. He leaned forward slightly. I requested you specifically, Ms. Kingsley, because I've followed your career. The Shen Technologies case, the Martelli prosecution. You don't just defend your clients. You understand the systems that create vulnerability in the first place. She'd been praised before, but something about the way Jin spoke, the precision of his words, the weight he gave them, felt different. If then let me understand your vulnerabilities, she said, starting with why the federal government is interested in Park Enterprises now, after years of clean operations. That, Jin said quietly, is what I'm hiring you to determine. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. Marcus handled the standard intake questions while Amara watched Jin, cataloging details. The way he answered financial questions without hesitation, but grew more measured when discussing certain partners. How he deferred to Tae Yang only once, when asked about security protocols at their warehouses. The intelligence in his eyes that suggested he was conducting his own assessment in parallel. When they stood to leave, Jin remained behind as Tae Yang stepped into the corridor. Ms. Kingsley, he said, his voice lower now, meant only for her. May I ask a personal question? Professional alarm bells rang, but curiosity won. You may ask. Why this? Corporate defense. Protecting people who often don't deserve protection. It was the kind of question that could be insulting, but the way he asked it, genuine, thoughtful, felt like a genuine inquiry. Because the system isn't perfect, Amara said, And someone needs to ensure it doesn't run over people just because it can, even complicated people. Maybe especially them. Jin smiled then, a real smile that transformed his careful features. Then we'll work well together. After he left, Marcus turned to her with wide eyes. Did that feel strange to you? Which part? All of it. The way he looked at you. The questions he asked. I've been doing this 12 years, Amara. That wasn't a normal client meeting. Amara gathered her materials, her mind already organizing the investigation strategy. No, she agreed. It wasn't. The next 2 weeks consumed Amara in the way only a complex case could. Park Enterprises delivered documents in waves, shipping manifests, customs declarations, wire transfer records, property deeds. She spent her days building timelines and her nights cross-referencing transactions against federal banking regulations. The evidence was sophisticated in its ambiguity. Nothing overtly illegal, but patterns that could suggest illegality to the right prosecutor. Payments that moved through multiple accounts before reaching their destination. Shipments declared as one thing that might have been another. Real estate purchases at prices that seemed slightly off-market. And the kind of thing that could be legitimate business practice or criminal enterprise depending on your interpretation. Jin called every other day with additional information, his voice becoming familiar over the phone. He listened to her questions without defensiveness, provided answers that were detailed but never quite complete. And twice, he'd asked her to dinner, casual requests she'd declined professionally. I don't socialize with clients during active representation, she'd told him the second time. Of course, he'd replied. That's part of why I chose you. Now, on a Thursday evening at nearly 10 p.m., Amara sat alone in her corner office, reviewing depositions from Jin's warehouse managers. Rain streaked the windows, turning the city beyond into an impressionist painting of light and shadow. And her desk phone rang, the internal line. Ms. Kingsley? There's a Jin-Soo Park here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says, send him up. She stood, smoothing her blouse, checking her reflection in the dark window. Her hair had escaped its bun hours ago, curls falling around her shoulders. She looked tired. She looked human. She sat back down, pulling her hair up again. Jin appeared in her doorway in dark jeans and a black sweater. The first time she'd seen him in anything but a suit. It made him seem younger, less armored. I apologize for the intrusion, he said. I saw your office lights from the street. You were in the neighborhood at 10 p.m.? I own the building 3 blocks south. I often work late. He held up a bag. I brought food. You mentioned in our Tuesday call that you'd been skipping meals. She had mentioned that, in passing, during a discussion about deposition schedules. Mr. Park. Jin, please. We're working closely together. Formality seems excessive. Jin, she corrected, the name feeling strange on her tongue. This isn't appropriate. Bringing food to my lawyer who's working late hours on my case? Showing up unannounced. Making this personal. He set the bag down on the chair across from her desk but didn't sit. You're right. I'm sorry. But I'm also not sorry, because I wanted to see you, and I don't apologize for wanting things. The honesty was startling. Most people, especially powerful men, wrap their desires in pretense. Jin simply stated his, as if transparency was its own kind of power. I need to maintain professional boundaries, Amara said carefully. I respect that, but I also respect honesty, so I'm telling you, I'm attracted to you. Your mind, the way you approach problems, the way you refuse to be intimidated in our first meeting. He paused. The way you look right now, tired and brilliant and dedicated to something you believe in. Heat crawled up her neck. Jin, I'm not asking you to act on it. I'm simply acknowledging what exists between us. Because pretending seems like its own form of dishonesty. She should ask him to leave, She should cite ethics rules and professional standards. Instead, she heard herself say, "What's in the bag?" His smile was quick, pleased. Bibimbap from a place in Koreatown. The owner is a friend. Well, I told her I needed something restorative for someone who works too hard. They ate at her desk, the silence surprisingly comfortable. Jin asked about her undergraduate years at Yale, her decision to pursue law instead of the finance career her father had wanted. She found herself talking more than she intended, his questions drawing out details she rarely shared. "Your parents must be proud," he said. "Partner at 32. That's exceptional." "My mother is." "My father." Amara set down her chopsticks. "He thinks I'm wasting my potential defending moral ambiguity, as he calls it. He wanted me to be a prosecutor, to put bad people away instead of keeping them free." "And what do you think?" "I think bad people is a simplistic construction. I think the system is designed to crush anyone who can't afford to fight it. And I think that's unconscionable." She met his eyes. "I think everyone deserves a competent defense, regardless of what they've done. Even if they're guilty, especially then. That's when they need a good lawyer most." Jin was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I believe that honor exists in unexpected places, that the world creates categories: legal, illegal, moral, immoral, but reality is more complex." He leaned back in his chair. "I believe that sometimes the people society calls criminals are simply people operating under different rules." There was something in the way he said it. Not hypothetical, but personal. "Are you trying to tell me something?" Amara asked quietly. "I'm trying to let you know me. So that when you find things in my records that concern you, you'll ask me about them instead of making assumptions." "What will I find?" "Complications, associations, evidence that I exist in spaces between what's clearly legal and what's not." His gaze held hers. "But also evidence that I have lines I will not cross, principles I will not violate, even when it costs me." It should have been a red flag, should have sent her to the managing partner with a resignation from the case. Instead, it felt like an invitation to see him clearly. "I should get back to work," she said, though she made no move to stand. "Of course." Jin rose, gathering the empty containers. At the door, he paused. "Amara, may I call you that when we're alone?" She should say no. "Yes." "Thank you for letting me intrude on your evening." After he left, Amara sat in the silence of her office, her heart beating faster than it should. She pulled up the Park Enterprises files again, but the numbers blurred. She was in trouble. Professional trouble, ethical trouble, and something deeper that she didn't have a name for yet. The deposition took place in a federal building downtown, the kind of architecture designed to intimidate. High ceilings, marble floors, the seal of the Department of Justice watching from every wall. Amara arrived 30 minutes early with Jin and Tae Yang, all three of them dressed for battle in shades of navy and charcoal. The federal prosecutor was Bradley Whitmore, a man in his late 40s with a reputation for aggressive tactics and political ambition. "Ms. Kingsley," he greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm surprised Morrison, Keating put their rising star on this case. Seems like a waste of your talents." "Perhaps you should focus on your questions rather than my career choices, Mr. Whitmore." The deposition lasted 6 hours. Whitmore hammered at Jin's business practices, his overseas partners, the structure of his holdings. Jin answered each question with precise calm, giving exactly what was required and nothing more. Amara objected strategically, her interventions cutting off problematic lines of inquiry before they could develop. During the lunch break, they convened in a private room. Tai Yang stepped outside to take a call, while Amara reviewed her notes. "You're enjoying this," Jin observed. She glanced up. What? The chess game. The strategy. You're in your element. I'm doing my job. You're brilliant at your job. There's a difference. He moved closer until only the table separated them. Whitmore has nothing substantial. He's fishing. He's fishing because he suspects something. The question is what? Jin was quiet for a moment. May I show you something? He pulled out his phone, typed briefly, then handed it to her. On the screen was a photograph of a ledger, handwritten entries in Korean, numbers and names in columns. What is this? Amara asked, though something in her chest tightened. Records from one of my warehouses, not the official books, the real ones. She should refuse to look, should hand the phone back and pretend she'd never seen it. Instead, she studied the entries. Her knowledge of basic Korean from a semester abroad enough to recognize certain terms: payment, protection, territory. Jin, what exactly is Park Enterprises? It's exactly what I told you. A legitimate business with import-export operations, real estate holdings, and hospitality investments. And what else is it? He took the phone back, pocketing it. My family has operated in New York for 3 generations. We maintain order in certain neighborhoods. We sit on a council with other families who do the same. We have rules: no drugs, no human trafficking, no harm to civilians. We keep the peace in our territory. The word families hung between them, heavy with implication. You're telling me you run a criminal organization, Amara said flatly. I'm telling you, I lead a community that operates outside conventional legal structures but maintains its own codes of honor. He held her gaze. I'm telling you the truth you suspected, but hoped wasn't true. Her mind raced through the implications: professional, legal, ethical. You've made me complicit. No, I've given you the choice to walk away with full compensation and no consequences, or to continue representing me, knowing exactly who I am. Why would I continue? Because you believe everyone deserves a defense. Because the federal case against me is manufactured. Whitmore is being pressured by people who want to destabilize the council, create chaos in neighborhoods that have been peaceful for years. He stepped around the table, closer to her. And because you want to, because whatever exists between us is more than professional, and you feel it too. Amara stood, needing the physical movement to process the flood of information. You're asking me to compromise everything I've built. I'm asking you to decide what matters most: the appearance of morality or the complicated reality of it. Before she could respond, Taeyang knocked and entered. We're being recalled. The afternoon session was brutal. Whitmore had found some new angle and attacked it relentlessly. But Amara's mind was split, part of her parrying his questions while another part replayed Jin's confession. By the time they finished, evening had fallen. In the building's lobby, Taeyang excused himself while Jin and Amara stood near the windows overlooking Federal Plaza. I need time to think, Amara said. Of course. And you need to understand, if I continue this representation, it's because I believe the federal case is unjust, not because I approve of everything you do. I understand. Do you? Because I won't be your lawyer and your lover, Jin. I won't be the woman who looks the other way while you... I would never ask you to look away. His voice was quiet but firm. I would ask you to see clearly and decide if what I do, maintaining stability, protecting my community, operating by codes that have existed longer than current laws, is really so different from what you do in courtrooms every day. It was a question she couldn't answer yet. Amara spent the weekend alone in her apartment, reviewing case files and wrestling with her conscience. The legal ethics were complicated, but navigable. Jin's admission didn't create a mandatory reporting situation, and she wasn't being asked to further any criminal activity. The federal case genuinely appeared to be overreach. But the personal ethics were thornier. Monday morning, she called Jin from her office. "I'm continuing as your counsel," she said without preamble. "But we need boundaries. No more late-night visits. No more personal questions. This is a professional relationship, and it stays that way." A pause. "All right. I'm serious, Jin. I know you are. I respect it." 2 days later, she found a delivery at her desk, a leather portfolio with her initials embossed in gold. Inside, a note in precise handwriting, "For organizing complicated cases." J. She used it anyway. The investigation intensified. Whitmore subpoenaed additional records, deposed more employees, built his circumstantial case brick by brick. Amara countered each move, finding procedural flaws and evidentiary gaps. They developed a rhythm, Jin providing information, Amara translating it into defensible legal positions. And despite her boundaries, the connection between them deepened. It happened in small moments. The way Jin anticipated her questions during strategy sessions, how he brought her coffee exactly as she liked it without being asked. The night she mentioned her father's recent diagnosis, and Jin simply said, "I'm sorry. That must be frightening," without offering empty reassurance. 3 weeks into the representation, they worked late in Jin's office, a penthouse space in the Park Enterprises building with views that stretched across the city. Amara stood at the windows, her reflection ghostly against the lights beyond. "Your father," Jin said from where he sat at his desk. "How is he?" "Stubborn. Refusing treatment because it might make him weak." She turned. "He's spent his whole life being strong. He doesn't know how to be anything else." "Strength takes many forms." "That's what I tried to tell him. He wasn't interested in hearing it from me." Jin stood, crossing to where she waited. Close enough that she could smell cedar and rain, could see the concern in his dark eyes. "His loss," Jin said quietly. "You're extraordinary, Amara. If he can't see that, it's his failure, not yours." She should step back, should maintain the professional distance she'd demanded. Instead, she said, "Why me, Jin? You could have hired any attorney in New York. Why did you request me specifically?" "I told you. Your reputation. The truth." He smiled slightly. "I saw you argue the Martelli case. I sat in the gallery for 3 days, watching you dismantle the prosecution's timeline. You were fierce and precise and completely uncompromising. And I thought, that's someone who understands that truth is complicated, someone who fights for it anyway." "That's why you hired me?" "That's why I wanted to meet you. I hired you because when you walked into that conference room, you looked at me like I was a problem you intended to solve. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Like I was worth understanding." Her heart hammered. "Jin, I know. Boundaries. Professional relationship." He raised his hands in surrender but didn't move away. "But you asked for honesty, and I'm giving it to you. I respect your rules, Amara. That doesn't mean I stop wanting to break them." The kiss happened before she could think better of it. She closed the distance between them, her mouth finding his in a surge of want that had been building for weeks. Jin responded immediately, his hands coming up to frame her face, gentle despite the heat between them. He tasted like coffee, and something darker. His body was lean and solid against hers. When his fingers threaded through her hair, dislodging pins and releasing her curls, she made a sound she'd never heard herself make. Then reality crashed back. She pulled away, breathing hard. "I can't. We can't." "Amara." "No. This is exactly what I said wouldn't happen." She grabbed her bag, her materials, moving toward the door. "I'll email you my questions about the shipping records. We can discuss them over the phone." "Wait." Jin caught her arm gently, releasing it immediately when she stiffened. "I'm sorry. That was my fault." "It was both our faults. Which is why it can't happen again." She made it to her car before she let herself feel everything: the want, the fear, the certainty that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Unknown number. Sitting up in her darkened bedroom, her heart still pounding from the threatening voice, Amara stared at Jin's contact information on her phone. She should call the police. She should call her senior partner. She called Jin. He answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the hour. Amara? Someone just called me, threatened me about representing you. Are you home? Yes, but... Stay there, lock your doors. I'm sending Taeyang. Jin, I don't need... Please. His voice held an edge she'd never heard before, something sharp and dangerous. Please. Just let me know you're safe. 20 minutes later, Taeyang arrived with another man, both of them checking her apartment's security with professional efficiency. Taeyang handed her a phone. A burner, she realized. Jin wants to talk to you, he said simply. She took the phone, moving to her bedroom, while the security team swept the rest of her apartment. Amara. Jin's voice was tight with control. Are you hurt? No. Just scared. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have anticipated. Who was it? A pause. Probably Antonio Calabresi. He's a rival. Businessman. Old-school Italian family that's been pushing against the council's current structure. He sees me as weak because I have rules. Rules about drugs and trafficking. Yes. Amara sat on her bed, her mind shifting from fear to analysis. He's trying to scare me off the case, which means he's worried about what I might uncover that would strengthen your position. Amara, you don't have to. If I drop you as a client now, Whitmore wins. Calabresi wins. And I look like someone who can be intimidated. She felt her spine straighten, her lawyer's mind taking over. I don't intimidate easily. You're sure? No. But I'm not letting some old-school mobster think he can threaten a black woman lawyer and get away with it. She heard Jin's sharp exhale, something that might have been a laugh if the situation weren't so serious. You're remarkable. I'm stubborn, there's a difference. She glanced toward her bedroom door. How long will your men be here? As long as necessary. Taeyang will coordinate with your building's security. And I'm going to make it very clear to Calabresi that you're under my protection. I know you don't need it. But you're going to accept it anyway, because I can't focus on anything else if I'm worried about your safety. It should have annoyed her, this presumption. Instead, it felt like care. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Jin, what are you going to do to Calabresi? What I have to. Nothing you need to worry about. After they hung up, Amara lay awake, staring at her ceiling and thinking about the man she'd kissed 2 nights ago. The man who ran a criminal organization with honor codes. The man who'd just sent armed guards to protect her without asking permission first. The man she was falling for despite every professional instinct screaming that this was impossible. The meeting Amara had scheduled with the managing partners for Monday morning suddenly felt like walking into an ambush. Charles Morrison, the firm's founding partner, sat at the head of the table with his usual air of patrician authority. Beside him, Jennifer Keating looked sympathetic but wary. Amara, Charles began without preamble, we've received some concerning information about the Park Enterprises matter. Here it came. What information? She asked, her voice level. That you've been seen outside professional settings with Jinsu Park. Late-night meetings. Personal interactions. He folded his hands. I don't need to tell you how problematic that appears. Who provided this information? That's not relevant. It absolutely is. Because someone is trying to undermine my representation and discredit me personally. She pulled out her tablet, calling up the notes she'd prepared. 3 days ago, I received a threatening phone call at nearly 3 a.m. The caller specifically told me to reconsider my representation of Park Enterprises. This smells like a coordinated attack. Jennifer leaned forward. Did you report the threat? Yes. To Mr. Park and his security team, who are investigating. Not to the police? Charles asked. Not yet. I'm a lawyer, Charles. I know how to assess risk. The risk I'm concerned about is to this firm's reputation. His expression hardened. There are questions about Park's business practices, associations with known criminal elements. If those questions have merit, and you're seen as compromised. I'm not compromised. Yes, I'm competent. And I'm representing a client against a federal overreach case that should concern anyone who cares about due process. Amara stood, gathering her materials. If you want to remove me from this case, that's your prerogative as managing partners. But you'll do it on the merits, not because someone is running a whisper campaign. She left the conference room with her head high, her heart pounding. By afternoon, the whispers had started. She heard her name in hallways, saw the speculative looks from other associates. Someone had leaked information, carefully chosen details that painted her relationship with Jin as improper without quite crossing into actionable defamation. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You should have listened. Then a photo. Her and Jin at the window of his penthouse office, in their faces close together. Taken 2 nights ago, before they'd kissed. Someone was watching. Amara called Jin immediately. I know, he said before she could speak. Tae Yang spotted the surveillance. We're handling it. By handling it, you mean? Nothing illegal. I'm calling a council meeting. Calabrese has violated protocols by targeting someone outside our world. That requires a response. Jin, I don't want violence. There won't be. Not if he's smart. But I need you to trust me. Trust. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. I'm getting pressure from my firm, she said. They think I'm compromised. Are you? The question hung between them. Was she? Could she honestly claim that her feelings for Jin hadn't affected her judgment? I don't know, she admitted. But I know the federal case against you is unjust. I know that Whitmore is being pressured by someone with connections to Calabrese, and I know that walking away now would make me a coward. Then don't walk away. Fight. Show them who Amara Kingsley is. That night, she worked until midnight, building a counterattack. She documented every irregularity in Whitmore's investigation, every procedural shortcut, every piece of evidence that suggested external pressure. She prepared a motion to dismiss that was 40 pages of legal precision and controlled fury. And she tried not to think about Jin in a room with men who settled disputes with methods she didn't want to imagine. The council meeting took place in a restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of establishment that looked unassuming from the outside, but hummed with old power inside. Jin arrived with Tae Yang, both of them dressed in dark suits that carried a weight beyond fashion. The round table held 5 men: Jin, Antonio Calabrese, and 3 other family representatives. Calabrese was exactly what Jin had described. Old school, in his 60s, with the kind of face that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Park. He greeted Jin with a nod that barely qualified as respect. You called this meeting. Speak. Jin remained standing. You targeted my attorney, a civilian with no connection to our world. That violates council protocols. Calabrese shrugged. I gave her advice. If she chooses to ignore it, that's her problem. You threatened her at 3 in the morning. You're conducting surveillance. You're leaking information to her law firm to damage her reputation. Jin's voice stayed level, but everyone in the room felt the current beneath it. That ends now. Or what? You'll send your lawyer after me with a subpoena? Calabrese laughed, and the other men at the table shifted uncomfortably. This is the problem, Park. You bring outsiders into our business. You break tradition with your rules and your college boy ethics. You make us look weak. I make us look civilized. There's a difference. To you, maybe. To me, You look like someone who's forgotten where real power comes from. Calabrese leaned forward. That woman. She's making you soft. Making you sloppy. That's why I'm going after her. Because when she's gone, maybe you'll remember what you actually are. The temperature in the room dropped. Jin's hands remained relaxed at his sides, but Taeyang shifted infinitesimally closer. What I actually am, Jin said quietly, is the youngest man at this table who has tripled his family's territory in 5 years, who has maintained peace in his neighborhoods while yours burn with internal conflicts, who has built legitimate businesses that generate real wealth instead of skimming from dying operations. He walked around the table until he stood directly across from Calabrese. What I actually am is someone you need more than you want to admit, because the old ways you cling to are dying and you know it. The federal attention you've drawn with your sloppy operations puts all of us at risk. That's why Whitmore is investigating me, because you gave him an opening. Calabrese's face flushed red. You accuse me. I'm stating facts. Your organization is compromised. Someone in your crew is feeding information to the feds, and they're using it to build a case against the council, against all of us. Jin placed both hands on the table. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop targeting Amara Kingsley. You're going to clean your house. And you're going to remember that the council exists for our mutual benefit, not your personal vendetta. And if I refuse? One of the other men, Carlos Reyes, the head of a Dominican crew, spoke up. Then you'll answer to all of us. Park's right. The federal heat is because of your sloppiness. We agreed to let him present his case. You violated that agreement. The fourth man, Russian-born Viktor Kuznetsov, nodded. This ends now, Antonio. The woman is off limits. Calabrese looked around the table, seeing the coalition against him. His jaw worked, pride warring with pragmatism. Fine, he spat. Your lawyer lives in her pristine world. But when this comes back on all of us, remember I warned you. Jin straightened. Noted. Taeyang will coordinate with your security to identify your leak. We'll handle this together, like the council is supposed to work. The meeting ended with the kind of tension that suggested this was a pause, not a resolution. But Jin had won the immediate battle. He called Amara on the drive back. It's handled, he said simply. What does that mean? It means Calabrese has been told to back off, and the council agreed. You're safe. Amara was quiet for a moment. Thank you. You don't need to thank me for protecting you. I do, actually, because it cost you something. I could hear it in your voice. Jin smiled despite himself. Oh, you're very perceptive. It's my job. It's more than that. It's who you are. He paused. Are you still at the office? Yes. Working on the motion to dismiss. May I see you? Jin, just to talk. I promise. She should say no. Should maintain the boundaries she'd established. Okay. Chapter 8. Jin arrived at her office an hour later, looking tired but satisfied. They sat on opposite sides of her desk, professional distance even now. Tell me about the motion, he said. So she did, walking him through her argument, that Whitmore had exceeded his investigative authority, that the evidence had been selectively gathered, that external pressure had compromised the investigation's integrity. It's aggressive, Jin observed. I'm tired of playing defense. Time to make them answer questions. You're angry. I'm motivated. There's a difference. She closed her laptop. They tried to make me doubt myself. They tried to make my own firm doubt me. But I know who I am, Jin. I know what I'm good at. And I know this case is worth fighting. Even though defending me complicates your life. Especially because of that. Because if I only defended easy clients, I'd be a coward. Jin stood, moving around the desk until he stood beside her chair. She swiveled to face him, looking up at this complicated man who'd turned her world upside down. I'm falling in love with you, he said quietly. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know it violates your boundaries, but you asked me for honesty, and that's the truth. Amara's breath caught. Jin, you don't have to say anything. I just need you to know that whatever happens with the case, whatever you decide about us, you've already changed me. You've made me want to be better than what I was. She stood, closing the small distance between them. I'm scared. Of me? Of this? Of caring about you so much that I lose sight of who I am. You won't. You're too strong for that. Too certain of yourself. I wasn't certain enough to stop this from happening. Maybe that's its own kind of certainty. Maybe you knew exactly what you were doing when you let me in. She kissed him then, rising on her toes to meet his mouth. This kiss was different from the first. Slower, deeper, weighted with all the words they couldn't say. Jin's hands framed her face like she was something precious, something that might break if he held too tight. When they broke apart, Amara rested her forehead against his. This can't work. You know that. Why not? Because you live in a world where problems are solved with intimidation and leverage, and I live in a world of evidence and arguments and rules. Those worlds aren't as different as you think. We both negotiate power. We both protect people. We both operate in systems that require understanding unwritten codes. That's a rationalization. It's an observation. He stepped back, giving her space. I'm not asking you to abandon your principles, Amara. I'm asking you to see that principles can exist in complicated places. And if your world requires you to do something I can't accept, then we'll face that when it happens. Together. Together. As if it could be that simple. But nothing about this had been simple from the start. The motion to dismiss hearing took place on a rainy Thursday morning. Amara stood before Judge Patricia Chen, a no-nonsense jurist known for her impatience with prosecutorial overreach. Whitmore argued first, his tone defensive despite his attempt at confidence. Amara listened carefully, noting the gaps in his reasoning, the way he danced around certain questions about his evidence gathering. When her turn came, she was surgical. Your Honor, the government's case rests on a pattern they've constructed by selective interpretation of standard business practices. But when we examine the actual evidence, not the narrative, but the facts, we see a different picture. She walked the judge through it. The customs declarations that were technically accurate, the real estate transactions that met market value when properly contextualized, in the wire transfers that followed standard international banking protocols. More troubling, she continued, is evidence that this investigation has been influenced by external parties with competitive interests in destabilizing park enterprises. We've documented contact between the prosecution and known associates of Antonio Calabresi, whose organization has a documented history of conflict with my client. Whitmore objected, but Judge Chen raised a hand. I'll hear it, Counselor. Amara presented carefully sanitized evidence, nothing that revealed Jin's true position, but enough to show Calabresi's fingerprints on the investigation, phone records, meeting logs, suspicious coincidences of timing. The government has allowed itself to be used as a weapon in a private dispute, she concluded. That's not justice. In its manipulation of the legal system. Judge Chen took 2 days to rule. When the decision came, it was a partial victory, the money laundering charges dismissed, the customs violations sent back for further investigation with strict new evidence requirements. Jin called her immediately. You won. We won, and it's not over. Whitmore still has the customs case. But you've cut him off at the knees. He'll have to rebuild from scratch. That was the goal. Amara. His voice softened. Thank you. For believing in me when you had every reason not to. I didn't do it because I believe in you. I did it because I believe in the law. Can it be both? Maybe it could. That evening, Jin invited her to dinner. A real date, he called it, now that the immediate crisis had passed. She accepted. In then spent an hour in her closet trying to find something that felt right. She settled on a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves and made her skin glow. Hair down, curls loose and natural. Minimal jewelry. Jin picked her up in a town car driven by someone other than Tae Yang, a gesture toward normalcy she appreciated. He wore a navy suit that had been tailored to perfection, his eyes widening when he saw her. "You're beautiful," he said simply. The restaurant was intimate, low-lit, the kind of place where conversation stayed private. They talked about everything except the case. Her family, his childhood in Seoul before his family moved to New York, the books they loved, the city they'd both made home. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Jin said over dessert. Amara considered. "I keep a journal. Every night. And I write down 3 things I did well and 1 thing I could improve. I've done it since law school." "That's very you. Disciplined and self-critical? Honest. Even with yourself." He reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. "Your turn. Ask me something. Do you regret it? The life you've chosen?" Jin was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. When I see the fear in someone's eyes because of what I represent. When I have to make choices that hurt people to protect my community. But then I think about the alternative. Chaos, violence, neighborhoods torn apart by stronger predators. And I know this is what I was meant to do. Protect people. In my own way. It's not your way. It's not the legal way. But it's not nothing." She believed him. That was the dangerous part. They ended the evening at his penthouse, and the city spreading below them in a carpet of lights. Amara stood at the windows while Jin poured wine, and she felt the weight of every choice that had led her here. "I can't be the woman who looks the other way," she said without turning. "I know. And I can't be someone you have to hide things from." "I know that too." She turned to face him. "So how does this work?" Jin crossed to her, setting down the wine. "We figure it out together. We set boundaries. We're honest when something crosses a line. We trust each other enough to have hard conversations." "That's very optimistic." "I'm not usually an optimist. You make me want to be one." She kissed him then, and this time there was no pulling back. His hands found her waist, pulling her close. Her fingers threaded through his hair. The kiss deepened into something that spoke of promises and possibilities, and all the complications they were choosing anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jin rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said quietly. "Jin. Just to sleep. I just want to hold you." It was the vulnerability in his voice that decided her. They fell asleep in his bed, her back against his chest, his arm wrapped around her waist. Safe and complicated and perfect for this moment. Morning came with pale light, and the realization that everything had changed. Amara woke first, Jin's breathing steady behind her. She should feel guilty, should be cataloging all the ethical violations, the professional risks, the impossibility of this situation. Instead, she felt certain. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Marcus. "Judge Chen wants to see us. Both sides. Today at 2 p.m. Amara slipped out of bed, pulling on Jin's shirt from the night before. He woke as she was gathering her clothes, his eyes tracking her across the room. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. Just a meeting with the judge." "About the case?" "Probably." He sat up, concern crossing his features. "Amara. It's fine. This is what happens. The judge wants to discuss next steps for the remaining charges." But when she arrived at the courthouse that afternoon, Whitmore's expression told her it was more than that. Judge Chen looked troubled as she called them into chambers. "Ms. Kingsley, Mr. Whitmore, I've received information that concerns me. Information suggesting that the defendant may have influenced my ruling through improper channels." Amara's blood went cold. "Your Honor, I have no knowledge of any such influence." I'm not suggesting you do, but Mr. Park's reputation is well known, and there are questions about contact between his associates and certain court personnel. Calabresi. It had to be. One last attempt to undermine Jin by making it look like he'd tampered with the court. Your Honor, Amara said carefully, may I suggest that this information be investigated thoroughly before any assumptions are made? My client operates legitimate businesses in industries that unfortunately carry prejudicial associations, but we have followed every proper procedure in this case. Nevertheless, I'm forced to recuse myself from the remaining charges. The case will be reassigned. It was a blow, but not a fatal one. Judge Chen's dismissal of the major charges would stand, but it meant starting over with a new judge, new arguments, new uncertainty. Outside the courthouse, Amara called Jin. Did you contact anyone? She asked directly. Anyone associated with the court? No, I swear to you. Because someone did, and now it looks like you tried to buy a favorable ruling. Calabresi. Jin's voice went hard. He's trying to make it seem like I violated counsel protocols by corrupting the legal process. Well, it's working. The judge recused herself. I'll handle this. No. Amara stopped walking, standing in the middle of the courthouse steps. No more handling things through your channels. This is my world, Jin. Let me fight this my way. Amara. I mean it. If we're going to make this work, us, this relationship, whatever we're calling it, you have to trust me to handle things in my sphere. A long pause. Then, all right. What do you need from me? Complete transparency. Every communication, every contact, every person who might have had access to court personnel. I need to prove you didn't tamper with anything. You'll have it. The investigation took 3 days. Amara worked around the clock, interviewing Jin's staff, reviewing communication logs, building a timeline that proved Jin had maintained proper distance from the court. What she found instead was a trail leading back to one of Calabresi's lieutenants, a man who'd contacted a court clerk claiming to represent Park Enterprises. The clerk had reported it, and the report had been twisted to suggest Jin's culpability. Amara prepared an emergency motion with evidence of the frame-up. Marcus helped despite his reservations, recognizing that the truth mattered more than politics. The new judge, Judge Raymond Martinez, heard arguments in a closed session. Amara presented her evidence methodically. The false communication, the forensic analysis proving it hadn't come from Park Enterprises systems, the clerk's testimony that she'd immediately reported the contact as suspicious. Your Honor, Amara concluded, this is a deliberate attempt to sabotage my client's defense by making it appear he engaged in criminal conduct. It's a fraud on this court, and it should be treated as such. Judge Martinez ruled from the bench. The case would proceed without prejudice. Calabresi's lieutenant would be investigated for obstruction, and additional safeguards would be implemented. Jin was waiting outside when she emerged, in Taeyang a discreet distance away. You did it, he said. I did my job. But she smiled as she said it. Thank you for trusting yourself, for not assuming I'd betrayed your trust. I didn't assume anything. I investigated and followed the evidence. That's what I love about you. You don't take anything on faith. You verify. Love. He'd said it again, casual and certain. Jin, we should talk about. I know. Boundaries, complications, all the very real concerns you have. He moved closer. But first, let me say this. I love you. I love your mind and your integrity, and the way you fight for what you believe in. I love that you challenge me and refuse to compromise yourself. I love you, and whatever rules we need to make this work, I'll follow them. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. She who never cried in public, who prided herself on control. I love you too, she said quietly, and it terrifies me. Good. If it didn't terrify you, You wouldn't be taking it seriously. They went back to his place and talked through the night. Establishing boundaries. She wouldn't represent him in any criminal matter related to his organization. He wouldn't involve her in any decisions about that world. They would keep their professional and personal lives separate where possible, transparent where they intersected. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy. But it was real. 6 months later, the federal case against Park Enterprises ended with a settlement. Minor fines for technical customs violations, no admission of criminal wrongdoing. Whitmore had been reassigned after internal investigations revealed his connections to Calabrese, who himself was facing federal charges for obstruction. The council had restructured, with Jin taking a more prominent leadership role. His insistence on certain ethical standards was gaining traction, changing the culture from within. Amara made junior partner at Morrison Keating, the youngest in the firm's history. Her reputation had survived the scrutiny, strengthened by her handling of the Park case. She and Jin maintained separate residences but spent most nights together, learning each other's rhythms. She met his mother, who'd looked at her with knowing eyes and said in Korean, "You make my son want to be better. That's all I've ever wanted for him." They had fights. About boundaries, about his world, about her need for control and his protective instincts. But they also had mornings drinking coffee on his balcony, evenings where she edited legal briefs while he reviewed business reports, nights when the complications fell away and it was just them. On a Tuesday evening in autumn, Amara stood in Jin's penthouse office reviewing discovery for a new case. Jin came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "What are you working on?" he asked. "Securities fraud. Tech CEO who thought he was above the law." "Sounds familiar." She turned in his arms. "You're not above the law." "No, but I'm adjacent to it." "That's a generous interpretation." He kissed her forehead. "I'm having dinner with Councilman Rodriguez tomorrow. He's pushing for community investment in our territory. I thought you might have thoughts on legal structures for that kind of initiative." This was their compromise. He consulted her on the legitimate side of his world, kept her isolated from the rest. "I might," she said, "after I finish this brief." "Always working," says the man who took a conference call at midnight last week. Point taken. He released her, but only to pull her toward the windows. The city spread below them, endless and complicated and home. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this complication?" Amara thought about her answer, really considered it, the way she considered all things. "Sometimes I wish it were simpler," she admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I'd walked away when you first told me the truth. And then I remember that simple isn't the same as right. That loving you makes me fight harder for what I believe in because I see how complicated the world really is. That you've made me better at my job because I understand now that defense isn't about enabling, it's about ensuring everyone gets a fair chance at justice. Even criminals? Especially them, because the system needs to work for everyone, or it works for no one." Jin smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his careful features. "I love you, Amara Kingsley." "I love you too, Jin-Soo Park." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "Even though you're impossible. Because I'm impossible. That too." They stood together at the window as night fell across New York, two people from different worlds who'd found something worth fighting for in each other. It wasn't simple. It wasn't easy. But it was theirs. Outside, the city pulsed with life, legal and illegal, moral and ambiguous. All the complicated humanity that made up the world they both protected in their own ways. And somewhere in that complication, they'd found their own form of truth.